This month we're going to be talking about verse 25 of Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu, which is perhaps one of the most important verses in the whole text. It is one of a series of 4 verses, but form the very heart of Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu, because in these 4 verses, Bhagavan talks about the nature of ego. And Bhagavan has diagnosed that the root of all our problems is our rising as ego. Because we have risen as ego, we experience all pleasure and pain, life and death, all forms of duality, all multiplicity. We experience only because we've risen as ego. So in these verses, he describes the nature of ego. As I say, this is the third in a series of 4 verses. I'll just quickly go over the previous 2 verses, just to get the continuity. In verse 23, he says, "This body does not say I." When he says the body does not say I, he means that's a metaphorical way of saying the body is not aware of itself as I. No one says in sleep, "I do not exist." So what we have to infer from these 2 sentences, firstly, the body isn't aware of itself as I, but in sleep no one says in sleep, "I do not exist," because we are all aware of our existence in sleep. We are aware that we have slept. So in order to sleep, we must have existed. We couldn't sleep if we didn't exist. And not only do we exist in sleep, we are aware that we exist in sleep, because we very clearly remember after waking up that we were in a state in which we were not aware of any phenomena. Because we were not aware of any phenomena in sleep, we generally mistake sleep to be a state of non-awareness. But actually we are aware of the non-awareness of any phenomena. So sleep is actually a state of awareness, but a state in which we're aware without being aware of any phenomena. So that means, since we're aware of ourselves in sleep without being aware of the body, this body is not what we actually are. But now we experience ourselves as the body. That which experiences itself as body is ego. So that's the first 2 sentences. In the third sentence, he talks about the ego specifically, but without actually mentioning the word ego. He says, "After one thing I rises, everything rises." That's only when we rise as ego do we become aware of all phenomena. So, and according to Bhagavan, nothing that we perceive exists independent of our perception of it. So all things come into existence only when we come into existence as ego. That is when we rise as ego. And therefore, he says, contemplate with a subtle mind where this I rises. In other words, we should investigate ourselves. Right? What is the source from which this spurious I, the ego, rises? And in the Kalivemba version, he says that if we investigate thus, this ego will slip away. Ego seems to exist only when we attend to other things. When we try to see what this ego is, it subsides and disappears, because it doesn't actually exist. It merely seems to exist when we're aware of other things. So that's verse 23. In verse 24, he begins the first sentence saying the same thing. The insentient body does not say I. That is, the body, it's not the body that is aware of this world. It is ego that is aware. But because ego mistakes itself to be the body, ego mistakes the body, thinks that this body is sentient. So Bhagavan says the insentient body does not say I. It's not aware of itself as I. Being awareness does not rise. The term he uses for being awareness is satchit. Satchit can mean being awareness in the sense of awareness of being. It can also mean real awareness. That is, there's a basic awareness underlying this ego, which doesn't rise or set, which is present in all the three states. Ego appears only in waking and dream, disappears in sleep. But whether ego appears or doesn't appear, there's an underlying fundamental awareness, pure awareness. That is what we actually are. So there are two. He said, the body doesn't say I, being awareness doesn't rise. And in the third sentence he says, in between, one thing, I, rises as the extent of the body. That in between is a metaphorical way of saying it is neither this nor that, but it takes on the properties of both. So this one thing, I, that's the ego, it rises as the extent of a body. That it limits itself to this body. It takes itself to be this body. So it seems to have the properties of body, of being limited in time and space. It also seems to have the properties of real awareness, in the sense that it is aware. So it is neither the insentient body, nor is it the real awareness, but it's a limited awareness that mistakes itself to be a body. And then in the next, the final sentence, he says, know that this, meaning this ego, or this I that rises at the extent of the body, in other words, this false awareness, I am this body, is the awareness in sentient not. Awareness in sentience not, Uḷḷadu. That means it is that which seems to bind awareness and this insentient body together as if they're one. So just like a knot is formed when two pieces of string are entangled, when awareness and the body become entangled, the knot that is thereby formed, or that is seemingly formed, is ego. So it is the Uḷḷadu, bondage, soul, that jiva, subtle body, ego, this samsara, and mind. So all these terms are referring only, in essence, all these refer only to this one thing I, namely the ego, but rises at the extent of a body. That is a false awareness, I am this body. So there's no samsara, there's no bondage, there's nothing and all these things in essence are only this ego. The mind in essence is only this ego. So if we get rid of this ego, we get rid of everything. That's the implication of that verse. Then now we come to verse 25. I will first read a summary of the verse and then go through it in more detail. What the verse essentially means is, grasping form, the formless phantom ego comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on form, it grows abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. If it seeks itself, it will take flight. Investigate. That's the meaning of the summary meaning of the verse, but I'll now go through it sentence by sentence. It consists of a number of very short sentences, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences. The subject for all these 5 sentences comes actually at the end. That subject is, in the last line, he says, muruvaṭṛa pēyahandai. Uru means form, muruvaṭṛa means devoid of form, pē means a ghost or a phantom, ahandai means ego. So he describes the ego as a formless phantom. It's a phantom because it doesn't actually exist, but it seems to exist. So that is the subject of all these sentences. So what he says about this formless phantom ego, first sentence is uruppaṭṛi uṇḍām. Grasping form, it comes into existence. That is, ego itself is formless. That is, it has no that which is formless is not separate from anything else. So in its essential form, in its essence, ego is nothing but pure awareness, which is not a form. It's not in any way finite or limited. It's in the infinite pure awareness. That is what the ego is in essence. But as infinite pure awareness, it isn't ego. It rises as ego by grasping form. That is, it has no form of its own, but it seems to have a separate existence because it grasps form. How does a formless phantom grasp form? Well, it is the nature of ego, it's just awareness. It's that which is aware of all other things. So it grasps form, it grasps in its awareness. By attending to and being aware of things, it grasps them. And form here means any phenomena, anything that is limited in any way, as all phenomena are, is form. So what is the first form the ego grasps? That is a body. So the ego comes into existence by grasping a body, is the implication of this first sentence. But does this mean that the body exists before the ego? No, because as he says in verse 23, after this ego rises, everything rises. And he emphasized that even more strongly in verse 26. So how the ego grasps form, it grasps them by projecting them in its awareness. And projecting and perceiving are one and the same thing. In a dream, we perceive a body as ourself, and we perceive a world that seems to exist outside us. All these are our own projection. But the projecting and the perceiving are not two separate things. But it is by projecting into our awareness, by creating in our awareness, that we perceive them. So that's what Bhagavan means by grasping, by projecting and perceiving. So the first form the ego projects and perceives is a body. And it takes that body to be itself, and thereby it comes into existence. All this, obviously there's no chronological sequence. The very rising of the ego brings a body into existence. And because the ego is nothing but the false awareness, I am this body. So the very rising of ego brings this body into existence. And by grasping this body as it's the grasping of the body as I, and it's coming into existence are all one and the same thing. We can't say cause and effect because it's all one process. So that's how ego comes into existence. In the Kalivemba version, Bhagavan added one sentence before this. That sentence is a simple exclamatory sentence. He says, Ene viche. That means, viche, ene means what, in the sense of as an exclamatory what. Viche is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit word vidya, which vidya means knowledge, but vidya can also mean magic or a miracle. So literally, ene viche means what a miracle or what magic, and it implies what a wonder. It's an exclamation. That refers not only to this first sentence, but to the whole of this verse. That the wonder Bhagavan is referring to is the ego itself. So what a wonder. Grasping form, it comes into existence. And then in the next sentence he says, uruppaṭṛi niṛkum. Grasping form, it stands. That is, only by holding on to this body, by continuing to be aware of itself as this body, does the ego stand. That it endures, it continues or persists. So by projecting and grasping this body as I, ego comes into existence. By projecting and grasping it as I, it stands, it exists. So throughout the waking and dream state, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. But the body we experience as ourself is not always the same body. Obviously, the body we experience as I in this state is different to a body we experience as I in dream. But the I that experiences this body is the same in both states. Sorry, I've got a bit of tickle in my throat. So I'll try and talk a bit slower so I don't cough too much. Then in the third sentence, he says, uruppaṭṛi uṇḍu miha ōṅgum. That means grasping and feeding on form, it grows abundantly. Whereas form in the previous two sentences was primarily referring to the form of the body, here in this third sentence, uru, form, refers to phenomena of any kind whatsoever, whether the seemingly physical phenomena of the seemingly external world, or the phenomena that we recognize as mental phenomena, thoughts, feelings, memories, hopes, fears, desires, etc. All of these, all phenomena are what Bhagavan refers to here as uru. And so it's by attending to and being aware of these that the ego feeds itself. That is grasping and feeding on form, he says. So the food for the ego is its awareness of things other than itself is what feeds and nourishes and sustains the ego. So he says, grasping and feeding on form, it it grows abundantly. The word ōṅgum means to grow, to spread, to expand, to increase, to ascend, to rise high, or to flourish. So, this sentence is very, very important, because here, not only the ego not only comes into existence and stands by grasping form, it also feeds itself and flourishes. From this, what we have to infer is that so long as we are attending to or aware of anything other than ourselves, we are sustaining ego. That's a very, very important principle of Bhagavan's teachings. Then in the next sentence, he says, muruviṭṭu uruppaṭṛum. That is, the ego isn't limited to any particular form. So in waking, we experience one form, one body as I. In dream, we experience another form as I. And since what we now take to be waking is actually a dream, and since every life is a dream, so long as the ego exists, it will be continually projecting bodies and experiencing them as itself. That is what is popularly known as rebirth. That is being born again and again and again. Actually, we are not born. The body is just a projection, because this is all a dream. So long as the ego survives, it will be continually dreaming, one dream after another. So when it leaves the body that it experiences as I in one state, it'll project and grasp another body as I. That's the significance of this sentence, muruviṭṭu uruppaṭṛum. Leaving form, it grasps form. That means leaving one body, it grasps another body. And likewise, throughout the waking and dream state, our attention is jumping from one thing to another. So we're grasping this, grasping that, grasping that. Grasping meaning attending and being aware of. So that is the nature of the ego. It's constantly holding on to things, because if it doesn't hold on to things, it cannot stand. If it lets go of all forms, it subsides. In sleep, when we fall asleep, why we fall asleep? Because we're too tired to continue projecting and perceiving phenomena. So because of our tiredness, we cease projecting and perceiving. In other words, we cease grasping form, and thereby we subside into sleep. But the problem with sleep is a very nice state, because it's a state without ego and therefore without phenomena. So we're all very happy and content so long as we're sleeping. All problems come when the ego rises in waking or dream. But sleep is not a solution, because though we fall asleep, we again rise out of it. That is, ego isn't destroyed in sleep. So how to destroy this ego? That's what Bhagavan reveals to us in the next sentence. Tēḍiṉāl ōṭṭam piḍikkum. That literally means if it seeks, it will take flight. If it seeks what? The implication is if it seeks itself. Tēḍiṉāl is a conditional form of a verb, and it doesn't even have a subject. We could take it if one seeks the ego, but who is the one who seeks ego? It is ego itself. So the implication, though tēḍiṉāl literally means if one seeks or if it seeks, it implies if ego seeks itself. In other words, if ego, instead of grasping other things, if ego tries to grasp itself, ōṭṭam piḍikkum, it takes flight. It runs away, it disappears. Why does it disappear? Because it has no form of its own. So it seems to exist only when it's grasping other forms. When it tries to grasp itself, since it is formless, it dissolves and disappears. So that's why this verse is such an important verse, because here Bhagavan is revealing what is the most fundamental principle of his teaching. But ego seems to exist only when it's aware of other things, only when it's attending to other things, only when it's looking outside, away from itself. When it looks back to itself, there's no such thing to be found, so it dissolves and disappears. This is how to get rid of the ego. This is a principle, but this is the very foundation of Bhagavan's teachings, and this is what makes Bhagavan's teachings so unique. Because though Advaita philosophy in general has been there for thousands of years, what Bhagavan reveals in this verse about the nature of ego hasn't been so clearly expressed anywhere else. It may have been indirectly implied here and there, but Bhagavan spells it out point blank. This ego seems to exist only when it's looking elsewhere. When it looks at itself, it disappears. That's why he calls it a formless phantom. If you're walking in a dark forest at night and a little bit of moonlight is filtering through the trees, you'll be seeing shadows and movement and everything. You may be imagining it's a ghost when you're not looking carefully. But if you look at any of the seeming ghosts carefully, you just see it's a moving shadow, or it's a moonbeam coming through the leaves of the trees or something. The phantoms seem to exist only when we don't look at them carefully enough. Just like the illusory ego. If we see a rope and mistake it to be a snake, the snake seems to exist only because we haven't looked at it carefully enough. If we look at it carefully enough, we see it's just a rope, and so the snake runs away. Metaphorically speaking, it takes flight. In other words, it disappears. It never actually existed there. Likewise, this ego never actually existed. And since all phenomena exist only in the view of ego, since ego doesn't exist, phenomena do not exist. That is the ultimate truth. That is what is called a jata. Nothing has ever come into existence or seemed to exist. What exists is only our real nature, which is pure awareness. So what Bhagavan expresses in this verse, this is the very essence of Advaita. It explains so much of Advaita philosophy. It also greatly, greatly simplifies Advaita philosophy. In the past, after Shankara, Advaita philosophy became very, very complex. Firstly, because there were so many other philosophies thriving in India, and each philosophy was trying to defend its own point of view, and would therefore criticizing other philosophies. So the Advaita philosophy had to defend itself against so many attacks from outside, and different Advaita philosophers took different approaches to defending against the attacks of the Buddhists and the other schools of Hindu philosophy and the Jains and so on. So different people took different approaches to defending the Advaita philosophy. And so it became first it became very complex, and secondly, there were it split into sub-schools of Advaita. Some people favored some explanations, some people favored other explanations. So it became unnecessarily complex. Bhagavan came along and has simplified the whole thing. And he's expressed it in such a simple way that Bhagavan's philosophy is so easy to defend against any other philosophy. Anyone who criticizes what Bhagavan has taught us, we can so easily defend Advaita as taught by Bhagavan, because it is so simple. And Advaita actually, Bhagavan's teachings actually challenge all our beliefs. So all philosophies are challenged by Advaita philosophy. Not that Advaita philosophy has a quarrel to pick with any other philosophy, because Advaita doesn't need to assert itself as the right. True Advaita, because true Advaita is not about is nothing to do with convincing other people. The whole problem is ego. So we have risen as ego, created all this multiplicity, this world with so many different religions and philosophies and beliefs and politics and this and that, all this complexity. How does it come into existence? It all appears only when we rise as ego. So since the whole problem is ego, deal with this ego, investigate this ego, it disappears. And along with it, everything else disappears with it. So what Bhagavan has taught us in this verse and elsewhere is such a simple and such a robust philosophy, but need not pick up a quarrel with any other philosophy. Let anyone believe anything. What does it matter? All those beliefs, all those religions, all those sciences, philosophies, all these things, in whose view does it exist? To whom does it all appear? To me. So who am I? That is the essence of Bhagavan's teaching. So he's given us such a beautiful and simple philosophy. If others are interested and ask us about it, we can tell them, but we don't have to go out and preach this to anyone, because in a dream, do you need to tell all the people in your dream that it's just a dream? Who is dreaming? We are a dreamer, so we have to wake up. No use in telling other people that they need to wake up, because they are just part of our dream. It's we who need to wake up. In a dream, there's only one dreamer. If that one dreamer wakes up, the whole dream comes to an end. So Bhagavan's philosophy is not a philosophy for arguing or for establishing in the world or anything. It's a philosophy for living. And how we live it? By turning our attention within and surrendering ourselves completely to the pure awareness that we actually are, the one soul reality. So after saying tēḍiṉāl ōṭṭam piḍikkum, if sought, it takes flight. That's how it's generally translated, because tēḍiṉāl, though it's an active verb, since in Tamil you can say an active verb without a subject and without an object, it's the easiest way of translating it into English is if sought, to make it a passive verb, because then we don't need a subject or an object. So if sought, but who is to seek ego? Ego has to seek itself. It has to turn its attention back on itself, to investigate itself. So after saying that, then then he says, uruvaṭṛa pēyahandai, the formless phantom ego, which, as I said earlier, is the subject for the whole of the verse. And then he ends the verse with just one word, or, which in this context, well, or is it's the root of a verb, and in Tamil the root of verbs is often used as an imperative. So it's an imperative here. Or means to consider attentively, examine, investigate, or know. And in the Kalivemba version, he extended it as or vai, which is both a second person singular future or predictive form, but not in this context. In this context, it's used as an optative or a more courteous imperative. So in this context, changing or to or vai doesn't change its essential meaning, but it does change its flavor. Instead of saying investigate, consider, or know, it implies may you can investigate, may you consider, may you know. So I mean, we can interpret this word in this context in three ways: investigate, meaning investigate this ego, or consider, meaning carefully consider all that is said here, or we can take to mean know, that is, understand all this. So consider and know in this context are very closely related. It means consider and understand this whole verse. Why Bhagavan says consider? Because Bhagavan doesn't expect us to just blindly believe whatever he says. There's good reason why he says this. So we need to think, we need to relate all this to our own experience. And we see, yes, we do rise as ego only when we are aware of ourselves as a body. And as soon as we're aware of ourselves as a body, we're aware of so many other phenomena. And so long as we continue attending to all these phenomena, this ego is flourishing. But if we try to, the next thing, tēḍiṉāl ōṭṭam piḍikkum, if thought it takes flight, that may not be our immediate experience, but if we begin to investigate this ego, we can at least begin to see how it dissolves and disappears, because we don't investigate it keenly enough, because we're not yet willing to let go of all other forms, all phenomena. We're not willing to surrender ourselves entirely. We don't surrender it. We don't investigate it keenly enough. But even investigating it a little, we can clearly see how, when we turn our attention to ourselves, we begin to subside back into the source from which we rise. So Bhagavan wants us to think very, very carefully about all the teachings he gives us. Nothing Bhagavan has told us is contrary to our experience. We need to relate it all to our experience. We need to understand why Bhagavan says this. So it's not just a matter of reading Bhagavan's teachings. That's what's called Sravana. We also need to do manana. We need to think deeply about it. And most important of all, we need to apply it in practice. So the considering the meaning of these verses is the manana stage. Investigating what is this ego is the nididhyasana, the actual practice. So we can, as I say, we can take this verb or, this imperative verb or, to mean either consider all this and understand all this, or we can take it to mean investigate. So we can take it to be an instruction to do manana, or an instruction to do nididhyasana. In fact, it's an instruction to do both. So that is today's verse. So if anyone has any questions about this, or as I say, this is the very, very essence of Bhagavan's teachings. If we understand this principle, that if so long as we attend to anything other than ourselves, we are feeding the ego. If we want to free ourselves from this ego, if we want to get rid of this ego, we need to, we as ego need to turn our attention back and try to attend to ourselves alone. Because if we attend to ourselves alone, we're no longer attending to any phenomena. So the false awareness, I am this body, which is ego, that false awareness dissolves, and what remains is just pure awareness, our real nature, which always exists, and which is the one infinite whole. So such a beautiful and simple philosophy Bhagavan has given us, and he summarized it so beautifully in this verse.
So when Bhagavan says, what a wonder, is he trying to make us to stress that point, or I'm trying to see what he's trying to convey there? It's not a wonder for him, but you know.
Well, it's a wonder for us when you think of it. What we actually are, we know this body is insentient. We all seen dead bodies. They're just like a lump of wood or something. But because we're aware of this lump of wood as it's dancing around and doing all these things. And how this body and all this world comes into existence, how a dream comes into existence in exactly the same way. So it is a wonder. And what's most wonderful of all, if we investigate it and find that there's no such thing as ego at all, then how there seem to be ego and how there seem to be phenomena, because the phenomena exist only in the view of ego. Without ego, there's no phenomena. So what is a greater wonder than this? What is a greater miracle? What is greater magic than this? This is the ultimate magic. But it's magic we could do well without. Who wants magic when we can be peaceful and happy? Magic is giving us endless trouble.
Right. So, and then the words tēḍiṉāl, it starts. It sort of really refers to focusing on the awareness that we actually are.
Yes, it means if ego attends to itself, though tēḍi literally means, tēḍu literally means to seek. It means if you, like, we are trying, what we are seeking is we're seeking to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. How can we be aware of ourselves as we actually are? Only by attending to ourselves. Because so long as we're attending to anything else, we're experiencing ourselves as ego. So in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to attend to ourselves alone. So Bhagavan uses very, very simple words, but actually they have very, very deep meaning. It's not that ego is something we've lost and we're seeking it. What we are seeking is to know what it really is. Who am I? It's not like you've lost your pen and you're looking for it or something like that. It's not seeking in that sense. In a metaphorical sense, Bhagavan is using the term seeking. It's seeking to know the answer.
Michael?
We're seeking to know what we actually are. The practical answer to the question, who am I?
Michael,
Yes?
if self-attention is akin to manana, then what is nididhyasana?
No. Self-attention is not, self-attention is nididhyasana. Nididhyasana means deep contemplation. So we have to deeply contemplate ourselves. Manana is the reflection, the thinking deeply about it. So we first need to, we can't investigate ourselves properly unless we understand what it is we have to investigate. So the reflection is necessary to get a clear understanding. But a clear understanding is not our goal, because we can understand all these things very clearly, but still we're suffering and having so many problems. So mere understanding, because who is understanding? Intellect is understanding, and intellect is an instrument of ego. So no use in ego saying, oh, I understand I'm not the body, because ego is itself that false awareness, I am this body. So though we may understand it, that's a very superficial, understanding is at a very superficial level. It needs to be an actual experience. So we need to think carefully about our teachings in order to understand, but understanding is not an end in itself, it's a means. We need to understand clearly in order to put it into practice. Firstly, we need to understand what it is we have to investigate. Also, we need to clearly understand why we need to investigate. So a clear understanding will give us a strong motivation and clearly guide us on the path. But the actual path is turning our attention within, back towards ourselves, that means. That is nididhyasana. So the self-attentiveness is the nididhyasana.
So is there any difference in the two English words that we use? Attention, self-attention, and self-investigation.
No.
Any subtle difference?
No difference at all. What is the basic instrument of any investigation? If you want to investigate what is the latest news, you open a newspaper or you switch on the internet. Or if the police want to investigate who the murderer is or who the thief is, any investigation, or scientists want to investigate. If a doctor sees an X-ray and he wants to investigate what's wrong, what is the basic instrument used for any investigation? It's observation, attention. But when we're investigating things in the external world, we may need so many instruments. The police need things to read the fingerprints. They need to read the DNA. So many things. They need instruments to interpret the clues. Or they look in the CCTV camera to see if they can get any clues. Scientists, they need big telescopes or microscopes or whatever those called, those big colliders, that big thing they've got in CERN, in Switzerland, whatever. To investigate other things, first there are five basic instruments: sight, hearing, taste, touch, and feel. So these are all instruments. And then we need other instruments out in the world. We need our binoculars, we need our telescopes, we need our microscopes, we need our laboratory, we need so many things. I mean, it depends what we're investigating, but we use other instruments. But the basic instrument in any investigation is observation, attention. Without observing, you can't investigate anything. But when we're investigating ourselves, no instrument is going to help us. The only tool we have to investigate ourselves is our own observation, our own attention. So self-attentiveness, attending to ourselves, is the way to investigate what we are. We just have to look at ourselves very carefully. Obviously, no, we can't look at ourselves with our eyes because we're not a physical thing, we're awareness. But here, look at is used in a metaphorical sense. We have to attend to ourselves. We have to turn our look within. Our mental gaze has to be turned within. That's back towards ourselves. Who am I? What am I? That is the investigation. And we do so by looking very keenly, by observing, by attending to ourselves.
The difference between a scientific investigation and this is that in a scientific investigation, it's repeatable. If somebody found something, doing something, I could be attending to myself, but the quality may not be there or whatever.
Yes, well, I mean, this is a much, much deeper investigation. This is something far, far deeper. So when scientists investigate things, they learn certain things. They learn about electricity, they learn about this and that, and we're enjoying all the fruits of it, all our modern technology and our modern comforts and conveniences. They're all the fruit of research done by other people. But in order to know ourselves, nobody else can do the research for us. We have to do the research ourselves. We have to investigate ourselves. How it is similar to science, in science, if an experiment is done, the results of that experiment are valid only if it's repeatable. Mm-hmm. So scientists, they do the same experiment again and again, and if they find something, they do it once and it doesn't work, then maybe there's something wrong with the theory. So they continually having to refine their theories and things. But in this case, so to speak, Bhagavan has done the research, he's come back with some findings, but Bhagavan, having found what he really isn't helping us. Well, it does help us, but he shows us the way. But we have to repeat the experiment. We each have to repeat the experiment for ourselves. And according to Bhagavan, it is repeatable. Each one of us can, just like he investigated himself, we can investigate ourselves. But whereas in science, anyone who studies and understands what the science is all about, they can become a scientist. But here it's not just a matter, this isn't just an intellectual exercise. This is going to the very heart of everything. So this requires requires a degree of willingness that is not necessary in science. You can be a great scientist and still enjoy all the pleasures of the world or whatever. But in this, we have to be willing to give up everything. Because how does everything come into existence? Only when we rise as ego. We give up everything every night when we fall asleep, but we give it up in the confidence that tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and resume where I left off. So it doesn't take any vairagya to fall asleep, but to surrender ourselves, to investigate ourselves and thereby surrender ourselves entirely, requires supreme vairagya, because we have to be ready to give up everything. In the verse 26, which we're going to be dealing with next month, what Bhagavan says is, ahandai undayin anatum undahum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahandai indrail indru anatum. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ahandai yabamam. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what it is giving up everything. Why is that? Why does he say therefore? Because in this verse, where we just talked about today, he says that if we investigate it, this ego, it will disappear. So if ego disappears, everything disappears along with it. So if we investigate ego, we are giving up everything. So we have to be willing to give up everything. That is why every Tom, Dick, and Harry can become a scientist and do scientific experiment, but only a person of supreme vairagya, person who's willing to give up everything, can be a Atma-vichara, the apara-vidya, the scientific vidya, is for anyone who's interested in it. But this para-vidya is only for those who are ready to give up everything. This para-vidya is Atma-vidya, self-investigation.
What is the simplest way of explaining self-abidance?
I would say pretty much this verse we've talked about today is the simplest way. That if we understand what the implication of what Bhagavan says, that is, we rise as ego by attending to things other than ourselves, is the essence of it. We stand as ego and we flourish as ego by continuing to attend to other things. If we attend to ourselves, we dissolve and disappear. That state in which the ego has dissolved and disappeared, That is the state of being what we actually are. That is,
Michael.
yep.
Repeat what you just said, because for a minute we got that first.
Yeah, I got a message saying the internet was interrupted. Sorry about that. Sorry. Give me a moment to catch my thought again. Oh yeah. I was saying the nature of ego is we rise as ego by attending to things other than ourselves. When we attend to ourselves, the ego dissolves and disappears. That state in which ego has dissolved and disappeared, that is the state of self-abidance. Self-abidance means being as we are, being what we actually are. What we actually are is a pure awareness. How to be just as pure awareness? By attending only to ourselves and not attending to anything else. By attending only to ourselves, ego dissolves and disappears, and we remain as we always are. Actually, self-abidance is not a new state for us to attain. Self-abidance is our eternal state. We are in self-abidance even now. But in order to see that we're in self-abidance, we need to look at ourselves. So long as we're looking outside, we seem to be rising as ego and dancing around and having so many worries and concerns and desires and hopes and fears, and all these things. If we look back at ourselves, we'll find that we are eternally in the state of self-abidance. Self-abidance simply means be as you are. Sumairu, merely be, just be. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Just those two words. Again, we might is because we are explaining simple then.
Michael, is this, we talked about holding on to the I thought?
So sorry, I wasn't hearing that very clearly.
Are we saying hold on to the I thought?
That's one way of saying it. Yes, I mean, hold on to, what does hold on to the I thought mean? It means attend only to yourself. I thought is another name for ego. That is, Bhagavan says ego itself is a thought. It's the root of all thoughts. It's the first thought. Everything other than our real nature is a thought. So the first thought is the I that is aware of all other thoughts. The thinker is the first thought. The thought that is aware of all other thoughts. Though ego is a thought, and therefore Bhagavan refers to it as the, actually in Tamil, though it's translated in English generally as I thought, it's actually in Tamil Bhagavan says, Nanenum ninevu. That means the thought called I. It's just a way of describing the ego. But it's emphasizing that the ego is just a thought. But though ego is just a thought, it's fundamentally different to all other thoughts, because no other thought is aware of itself or aware of anything else. Whereas ego is the one thought that is aware of itself and of all other thoughts. So how to hold on to this I thought? By being self-attentive. So holding on to the I thought is simply another way of expressing the state of being self-attentive. Is that clear?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I've said it, heard it, read it 1,000 times. Question, you know.
Yeah.
Like it's Michael. Some people say it stops the mind.
It's what?
It stops the mind. If I say, "Who am I?" I'm stopping the mind in a sense.
Well, yeah. It's not just a matter of saying who am I. It's a matter of investigating who am I. Investigating who am I means turning our attention back towards ourselves. And it stops the mind, because what is the root of the mind? The root of the mind is the first thought I, the ego. Ego rises by attending to things other than itself. It dissolves and disappears when it attends to itself. So it will bring the it brings the state to a mind. It brings the mind to a standstill. But actually, it's not even bringing the mind to a standstill, because the mind is mind only when it's active. When it ceases to be active, it's just pure being. So there's no state as a state of peace of mind, because peace of mind is the state in which there is no mind. Perfect peace of mind, perfect stillness of mind is a state of no mind, no ego. It's the state of pure self-awareness. And that is what Bhagavan means by silence. That's our real nature.
Go ahead, Jeff.
The verse says, does the verse say, I think, the mind is constantly on second and third person.
Yes, exactly.
Other outward form.
Yeah. What Bhagavan refers to as in this verse as what in some context Bhagavan refers to second and third persons is what in this verse he refers to as form. All phenomena are covered by the term second and third persons, but all objects, or everything perceived, is a second and third person. The perceiver is the first person. That is ego. That is the subject.
So I'm saying to my mind, stop worrying about second and third person. Think about first person. No?
Exactly. Let second and third persons take care of themselves. Attend to ourselves. That's all. That's Bhagavan's simple message. Why should Bhagavan says in one place, why should we carry, when we're traveling on a train, knowing that the train is carrying all the burden, why should we carry our small luggage on our head? Put the luggage aside, sit back and relax, travel happily. So that putting the luggage aside is putting aside all our concerns about second and third persons, about anything other than ourselves. The only thing we need to attend to is ourselves. Everything else will be taken care of automatically, if there is anything else.
So the body is also a second person in this.
Yes, exactly, definitely. Anything perceived, any object of perception is a second or third person. The perceiver of them is ego. So we've got two things. We've got ego and we've got phenomena. Subject, object. Oneself and all other things. Perceiver and perceived. So the perceiver is the first person. Second and third persons are whatever is perceived. Yes?
Hi, Michael. Okay, so how do I tease out, like, so this, even right now, what is speaking, this body is the second person.
Yes.
It's apart from the first person, the perceiver ego.
Yes.
So when I think, okay, who am I am not able to go beyond the intellect. Meaning, in a sense, like I'm not sure where the perceiver is and where the body, like they seem very enmeshed and merged.
Yeah. That is Chitjaragranti. They're tightly enmeshed. So that is what self-investigation is all about separating them. So how do we separate them? Though it seems very difficult, actually all we have to do is to try to attend to ourselves. Try to be aware of ourself alone. The more we put it into practice, the clearer it will become. So it's in any investigation, as you proceed with the investigation, the way becomes clear. But particularly this investigation, because what we are trying to attend to is ourself. We are the source of all light. That is the light of awareness. We are the light of awareness. So everything else is darkness and is illumined by our awareness. So when we attend to other things, our power of attention becomes relatively gross. When we attend to ourselves, we are refining our power of attention, increasing our clarity. So when people ask Bhagavan, how to do this? Bhagavan said, do you need to be shown the way inside your own home? You have to find the way inside. So we each have to, we learn how to be self-attentive by trying to be self-attentive. How does a child learn how to walk? It doesn't take lessons. It tries and tries and tries until eventually it can succeed. How we learn to ride a bicycle? We may read a little bit about balance and everything, but all that theory is of very little use to us. We just have to give it a try it, and the way becomes clear when we try.
And the power of attention.
I cannot tell you what you are. If you say, what am I to attend to? You're to attend to yourself. If you then say, but what am I? What is it I'm to attend to? You have to find out for yourself. How can anyone else tell you what you are? We all are clearly aware of ourselves. The problem is that our self-awareness is mixed up with awareness of this body. So we have to turn our body means, when Bhagavan talks about body, he's not just talking about this physical form. He's talking about all the 5 sheaths. That is the body, the life, the mind, the intellect, and the will. All of these things, they're all phenomena. They're all things other than ourselves. So who is it who is aware of these things? To whom do all these things appear? That in asking these questions, Bhagavan wasn't expecting us to repeat these questions. He's giving us clues. There is something here that is observing all this. The witness, it's sometimes called. Who is the witness? Who is it who is the perceiver of all these things? That is ego. If we turn our attention to that ego, the perceiver, we find no such thing. What remains is just pure self-awareness.
Do I need the body-mind to turn around to find myself?
Now we're stuck with this. Our aim is to get rid of this body or mind. But so long as we're stuck with it, let's make good use of it by turning it within.
It's an instrument you can use right now.
Yeah. We don't need anything because we are the infinite whole. So we don't need anything. But in order to experience our lack of need for anything, we have to turn our attention within to see what we actually are. When we see what we actually are, we don't need anything. Until then, it seems that we need so many things. We need food, we need clothing, we need shelter, we need this, we need that. We don't actually need anything. Once Kavyaganta said to Bhagavan, it seems to me that for just 3 rupees a month, we can live, that's sufficient to sustain us for a month. Bhagavan said, we don't even need the body, why then 3 rupees?
Does it simplify if we change the linguistics a little bit? Instead of asking ourselves, who am I? If we ask ourselves as what I am or what am I, does it make any more sense? Does it make it easier for people to understand?
Whatever, it means the same. Whether you say what am I or who am I, it's I, but it needs to be investigated. And it's not the question that matters. I mean, the question is a pointer. It's not even actually a question. It's an investigation. If I ask you, investigate what's written in this book, and I give you a book, do you sit there and say, what's written in this book? What's written in this book? No, you open the book and you look inside. So it's not asking ourselves, who am I? It's investigating who am I or what am I? Whether we word it in this way or that way, it's not the words that matter. It's the implication of the word, what the words are pointing at. Bhagavan actually never says, ask who am I? He says, investigate who am I. Asking who am I is at the manana stage. We need to think deeply about these things. Why we are not this body, not this mind. We can, that's all part of manana, which is necessary in order to get a clear understanding. Because so long as we mistake ourselves to be body and mind, how can we attend to ourselves? If I'm this body, I just sit in front of a mirror and I can see myself. But that isn't what Bhagavan means when he says, see yourself. Look at yourself. So we need to have a basic understanding. So we need to reflect on all these things. But in order to, the actual practice, we go beyond questions. It's we investigate.
Then Bhagavan say in one of the verses, sort of repeating who am I is like a drunken man.
Yes, in Atma-vichara, he says, it's like a drunken man who asking who or where am I? It's not, but Bhagavan never recommended asking questions. It's investigating. But the problem is, the most usual term Bhagavan used in Tamil, the most usual verb for this investigation Bhagavan used was nādu. Nādu means to investigate. The Sanskrit equivalent is vichar, or vichari. In Tamil it becomes vichari. That's a verb meaning to investigate. It also can mean inquire. But the problem with the term inquire, the English term inquire, in English, an inquiry can mean an investigation. It can mean simply asking. Or he inquired about her health. That means it means ask. So because people have generally translated it as inquire rather than investigate, and when they say Bhagavan says inquire who am I, people think, oh, I have to ask who am I. What he's using there, the term, not that's inquire in the sense of investigate, not inquire in the sense of asking a question. So if we translate it as investigate, then that confusion is avoided.
Right.
That's why generally I prefer to refer to it as self-investigation or investigating who am I? Because then you don't get that confusion of, but it means asking.
Investigation it is.
Yeah, I guess that's why Bhagavan wanted to clarify in that the Atma-vichara verse.
Yes. He understood people were misunderstanding and taking it as questioning. Because Bhagavan wrote Atma-vichara sometime in the mid to late 1940s. So by that time, so many English translations of his teachings were available, and English had then been translated into other Indian languages. So there was a lot of confusion. It was already prevalent in Bhagavan's time. If you read books like talks, people so often ask, Bhagavan, am I to ask, who am I? Bhagavan said, no, it's not for repetition. It's not. Oh, people ask, is it like a mantra? Am I to go on asking, who am I, who am I, who am I? Bhagavan said, it's not a mantra, it's not a question. You need to investigate what you are.
Any other questions? Srikar? Dean?
Eventually, we all come to silence. That is the aim. That is the aim. But true silence is only the state of the non-rising of ego, non-rising of ourself as ego. So if we investigate ourselves, what remains is silence. That is our real nature. So it's always good to end up with silence.
Right. Thank you so much, Michael.
Okay, pleasure.
Hope your cough gets better.
Oh, yes, it will take care of itself. All problems have their own solution. Whatever, Bhagavan says, whatever comes has to go. So nothing can stay. Even his ego has to go one day. That's a real problem. Even that will go one day.
Right.
When it gets fed up of looking outside and decides to eventually to look within, then there's no such thing. And all problems are over.
Right.